Kia ora and welcome to this D-List podcast. My name is Olivia, I'm the editor, and today we have Paula Tesoriero joining us, Chief Executive of Whaikaha. Welcome.
Kia ora, lovely to be here.
Thanks so much for your time. We've done a few different interviews and interacted in different roles, so it's really cool to have you on board today to chat about 1 year of Whaikaha and as an independent agency, and what are some highs and lows and other things in the works. So I guess let's start a bit about your kind of like current role, being the Chief Executive of Whaikaha, and last time we did an interview you would have been Disability Rights Commissioner. So tell us a little bit about, I guess, some of the differences in the role and how have you found that kind of transition personally?
Yeah, great question. And firstly, just kia ora to all your listeners, and lovely to be here and see the D-List space. It's fantastic, such a welcoming, accessible place. So encourage people to check it out. So you're right. My previous role as the Disability Rights Commissioner has some differences to this role. But what's really common in both roles is that both roles really just want to improve outcomes for disabled people in Aotearoa. But both roles actually offer some different ways of doing it. So the previous role, I was part of an independent human rights commission, and so we were really trying to effect change from outside of government. Whereas with Whaikaha, the Ministry of Disabled People, the opportunity is to try and effect change from inside government. And I always think that New Zealand will ultimately be a better place for disabled people when we have disabled people in all spaces and places. So that means disabled people in government, local government, non-government organisations, human rights institutions, people working for organisations like the D-List. When we are in all spaces and places, then I think we prosper as a country.
And I guess part of your role is working with other chief executives at other government agencies, so having that kind of influence there as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things about the current role is the ease of access I have to other chief executives. And I often rely on that quite a bit, sending a text to say, hey, can we have a chat about this policy that your agency is working on or this initiative? And I also get to be part of a number of forums and influence things across government that, do make the role, somewhat influential, which is, one of the reasons that disabled people fought so hard for so long to have a dedicated ministry was to have that influence across government. And, we're still pretty new, so it's going to take us time to see the effects of all of that. But I can definitely see the way that this role opens up access to other chief executives, to ministers, to the private sector, which is great.
And, I'm sure there'll be lots of texts happening behind the scenes that even our communities we don't realise and don't see, and we can get, frustrated, but there's work happening behind the scenes from a person with lived experience, which is really important.
Yeah, it's fantastic to, I think reflect on just how hard we all work, right? No matter what we are doing to advance things for disabled people, having disabled people working, in a variety of places is awesome. And, I'm really proud of the fact that just over 60% of the staff at Whaikaha are disabled. And so, they're bringing that lived experience, direct lived experience, or lived experience through family, which, really adds to the quality of our work.
Thinking about the last 12 months, so it's been around a year since Whaikaha has been a standalone government agency. It's gone through a few different waves and different phases. How would you rate this past year? Can you give it a rating out of 10?
Oh, I'm a little bit loath to give ourselves a rating because I think, in the end, it's for disabled people and their families and New Zealanders to decide whether we've done a good job or not. What I can say and what I'm really proud about is just how hard the team at Whaikaha work every day with such a passion for trying to change outcomes for disabled people. And so, we've done some really big things this year that, as we head towards the end of the year, I look back and think, actually, I'm really proud of, what started out as, a journey ahead trying to establish the new agency and deliver things along the way. So I'm really proud of that, really proud of the team.
Talk about some of the other highs and achievements and maybe some of the lows as well that we all share as community.
Yeah, I mean, I think undoubtedly, some of the lows were farewelling our disability support services colleagues into MSD and, having a different relationship with those colleagues now, and just, people react to change in different ways. And so supporting people through that change, was challenging at times. But alongside standing up the agency, next week we'll be launching the refreshed New Zealand Disability Strategy, which is a 5-year strategy with actions embedded in it that ministers have agreed to. So I'm really excited about, what that can achieve for disabled people. Last week we launched the New Zealand Sign Language Strategy, which is all about revitalising the wonderful language and culture that sits around New Zealand Sign Language. We also, just last week, launched the first cross-government disabled internship. So we've got 13 disabled people across 10 government agencies, which, for some of our interns, it's the first opportunity that they've had in a long time to be in paid employment and getting that foot in the door. We also have made progress on implementing, you might remember the UN in 2022 made a number of recommendations to New Zealand about what we needed to do to improve things for disabled people. So the government's agreed to progress a large number of those recommendations, and so we've been working closely with other agencies to make those, or to tick them off really, and make them happen. And maybe just one other that I'm proud of is the launch of Whaimana, which is our website with tools really to help people with supported decision making. So, as we know, substituted decision making is not what we want for disabled people, and so this website just helps provide guidance on how to support disabled people and older people to make decisions that they want to make. So those are some of the achievements.
You talked about change before and how that can be quite hard, and especially for some disabled people who rely on particular sources of funding, and that's kind of changed in the last couple of years. How do you adapt to change? What helps you, I guess, in terms of adjusting and things like that?
Yeah, I definitely want to acknowledge, the changes for our community, and the challenges that brought. And I think for me personally, in terms of managing change, I think, it's kind of an old saying, but I think it's true, hey, that as disabled people, we are fairly adept at change and managing different ways of doing things. So I think that helps. I think also probably spending time, as a Paralympic cyclist, and all the setbacks you have as an athlete, and setbacks in, getting my prosthetic leg technology to a state where, I could confidently rely on it in races. And I think those setbacks they do help you become a bit more resilient. And I think for me, I, really accepted a responsibility for leading our people through that change so that they could, see the vision for the future for New Zealand where, disabled people are thriving, and keeping people focused on that vision, I think helped. It gives us that reason every day. This is about disabled people thriving. So no matter what happens, let's just keep focused on that.
Yeah. No, I think focusing on kind of end goals and putting things into perspective also helps me as well.
Yeah.
You talked about a few different really important works of different strategies. So we've got the disability strategy and the NZSL strategy. Can you talk a bit about you talked about there are some government who are going to make government agencies who have got some actions for disabled people in our communities ourselves. How can those be a practical tool for us? Because understandably we can see a lot of consultation for strategies and we don't know where that goes. So can you kind of illustrate to us some kind of tangible ways that this is helpful for our communities?
Yeah, great question. And, sometimes the word strategy, can be kind of overused. And one of the things that was really important to the minister and myself when we, talked about developing the New Zealand disability strategy was we really wanted to make sure this wasn't a strategy that sat in a top drawer and wasn't actually implemented. And so we took a different approach. Rather than having a 10-year strategy like the previous one, we thought about doing it over 5 years and embedding the actions within it. So developing the actions alongside the strategy. And what that, I think, will mean when disabled people see the final strategy next week is a series of actions that ministers have agreed to. And I don't know if you saw the draft strategy, but there's some really practical things around supporting organisations in different ways. I can't reveal too much, right, because it's the final one's being released next week. But what I think people will see that's different in this strategy are the actions already signed up to. And so next year we move really quickly into implementing the strategy. I think the other thing, the New Zealand Sign Language strategy, that does not yet have the actions embedded in it, but the government's asked us to work with the deaf community to develop those actions really quickly so that by April next year we can put those actions into place. So I think the key thing, right, is not just a strategy and then never having actions to support it, but actually quickly having those actions or having them embedded, and then delivering on those will make a difference. And I think the challenge for us is to make sure that we're actually communicating really well with the disability community about what it looks like when those actions have been achieved.
Yep.
Like making it real for disabled people. And sometimes I think agencies or any organisation really can, end up sort of focusing on what they're doing internally and kind of forget to share with the world actually, what's going on. So we, have made changes to our internal comms team who have a real focus on trying to share and promote what it is we're doing. So hopefully we can get better at sharing that with the community.
And when I think about things like the Human Rights Act or the UN CRPD, they're tools that I guess we disabled people can refer to and be like, hey, this is what my life should look like, or this is the aspirations that the New Zealand government have signed up for, and reflect back. And it's not necessarily our job to be keeping people to account all the time because that gets tiring, but I think it can be a framework to be like, hey, this is my experience, this is what the strategy says, there's a bit of a mismatch, we should be working towards this.
Definitely. That's such a great way to put it. And you're right, it's not up to disabled people all the time to do that advocacy because, as you say, it's tiring. I think there's a responsibility on government agencies to be, sharing progress and working with the community on what next and how do we address those gaps.
You'll see around our podcast studio, we've got some stickers, and I know you've got some of our merch. We've got some cool merch at the dealers, just to like change the vibe of the interview now. If Whaikaha had some merch, what would it be?
I love your merch, and I have your stickers on all sorts of things, and I have one of the new T-shirts, the Accessible World one that you put out. So if we had merch, well, we have a really bold purple colour in our branding, so I think it would be purple, whatever it is. As a government agency using, public funds, we'd have to be careful about the purchasing of merch. But if there was good reason, then I'm sure some sort of purple T-shirt or purple something would feature.
Yeah, you talk a lot about thriving disabled people, so maybe there was some kind of slogan around that.
Yes. Yeah, disabled people thriving. A purple T-shirt.
Cool. You mentioned also how at Whaikaha there's 60% of staff have disabilities or experienced a disability. And around at the dealer's office, not to one-up you, but 100% of us are disabled. And we have a lot of disability lols and laughs. Things just happen around the office that we laugh about that you probably wouldn't laugh about with your non-disabled friends. So what are some disability lols that happen around the Whaikaha office that you can share with us?
Yeah, you're right. There are many, and it's quite nice to have a laugh when the work is really serious. I think that the lol I often use is the high five, the whole kind of give me five. And on one of my hands I don't have 5 fingers, I've only got 3, so I always say give me 3. And I kind of do that at work, but I also do it outside of work. And what's interesting is, because there's kind of a serious point to it as well, which is these sayings that over time, give me 5 assumes you have 5 fingers, and the majority of people do have 5 fingers. But there are other sayings, right? That sort of can be quite offensive actually to our community, that have just become part of the standard way of talking. And so sometimes I kind of use the give me 3 in a moment to have a conversation about assumptions and about language, and I pick my moments to do it, but sometimes it can lead to some really interesting conversations. But at work usually it's just a good old laugh.
Yeah. Good way to break the ice as well sometimes, as someone who feels awkward around disability. I know I've kind of said things like, I don't drink and drive, and people are like, oh, you can joke about that, and then that breaks down the ice. Little things like that.
Yep.
That's really fun. Earlier when you had just arrived, we were just talking about how warm and hot it is with summer coming up. Disabled people can have mixed feelings around summer. If you've got chronic illness, you maybe get a flare up, and you might want to do more outdoorsy things, but accessibility to beaches, for example, is a bit more limited. How do you find summer, and what are you doing for this break coming up?
Yeah, great question. And I totally agree that both seasons, summer and winter, have different challenges. So I find personally in the winter, I don't have great circulation in my leg, and I've got arthritis, particularly badly in one leg, or my leg, and in my back and things. And so in the cold weather, I find that quite painful. And whereas that seems to get better for me in the heat, but then what happens in the heat is my stump swells, and it's like, it can be a bit uncomfortable, and I have a fixed ankle that ends up with loads more fluid in it in the heat. And so I think both seasons kind of have those challenges, but I am super looking forward to summer. We've had a bit of a rough winter in Wellington, and lots of wind and rain and cold, and so I am looking forward to getting out on my bike over the summer, spending some time with family and friends, and just having a break from what has been a really enjoyable year and a really big busy year. So kind of want the team and myself to just recharge over the break and get back into actioning these strategies next year.
Cool. Wow, I think we all deserve a break.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for your time, Paula. Thank you for your work and sharing some insights about what happens behind the scenes that we may not realise, and looking forward to seeing some actions implemented in these strategies. We'll be here to see how progress goes. But thanks again.
Oh, ngā mihi nui. It's great to be here, and more than happy to come back and talk about, how things are progressing with actioning those strategies next year. And thank you for all the work that you do to support our community.
Cool. Thank you.